Just before we get into this video, guys, if you want to follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, the links are here. And if you also want to support me on Patreon as well and help out my channel, that would be absolutely awesome as well. But let's get on with the video. Hey guys, Wingy here and welcome to a brand new video. So for a long time now, I've been thinking about underrated seasons, overrated seasons, and I thought I would talk about it because there's often debates about who's the most underrated Doctor. What's the most underrated season? What's the most underrated story? Now, I did do like underrated and overrated Doctor Who stories on my channel before, and I thought today I would switch it up a bit and I would talk about the season of Doctor Who that I personally think is the most underrated. Now, this isn't necessarily me saying definitively this is it, this is fact. Obviously, you guys can have your opinion as well, and that is totally fine. I encourage it. But for me, this is what I think. So let's get into it. Now, people are going to think straight away that I am biased when I say this, but for me personally, I would have to say it is season 18. The reason why I think you guys would think that I'm being biased here is because, of course, this is a Tom Baker season. In fact, it's his last one. But the funny thing is, towards the latter half of Tom Baker's era, it's very hit and miss. I think his first 3 seasons are phenomenal. Season 15 is hit and miss. Season 16, again, is hit and miss, probably more miss than it is hits. And apart from City of Death, arguably Shada, and in my opinion Nightmare of Eden, season 17 isn't that great. I mean, Nightmare in Eden is a whole different video by itself. But season 18 is very unique, and within the Tom Baker era it stands out a hell of a lot. There were considerable changes made. There was a brand new showrunner or producer at the time. It was the first full season to be broadcast in the 1980s. Tom got a new look. Romana and K9, they were written out of the show. We got some new companions. The music changed. The tone of the show changed. Even the way that Tom plays the Doctor isn't the same in this season as it was throughout the rest of his era. Arguably for the better, at least at the time. I think if you still had early Tom, then why would you change it? But when you get the Tom Baker that is over the top and is throwing in too much of himself into the role, sometimes it can be a bit much. It's amazing, isn't it, that even though it's a Doctor that I absolutely adore, I can admit that there is some flaws there. Some people can't seem to do that lately. So season 18 for me starts in, I think, the worst way possible, because you've got a story called The Leisure Hive, which I would probably say is one of Tom Baker's worst stories. In fact, it's probably one of the worst stories in classic Doctor Who. The Leisure Hive, I think, is absolutely garbage. It's incredibly boring. Tom just looks like he's done with life in this one, and I don't blame him. I'm done watching it. The stuff in part 1 on Brighton I think is quite cool, and I think the design of the pharmacy is quite cool. I like that this story gives Romana quite a bit to do, and I like seeing the Doctor aged up a bit. It's something a bit different and it's something a bit new. Apart from that, this story is fucking gash. But if you can move past that and you can look at the rest of the season, it's a hell of a lot of fun. And it's incredibly interesting as well to me. Now, with Meg Loss, people just like to shit on it and say that it is one of the worst Doctor Who stories ever. I personally would say it is an incredibly fun ride. It's silly, it's camp, it's a hell of a lot of different things, but I really enjoy it for what it is. I'm not bored watching it. And the thing is, even if something is bad and objectively bad, which Meg Loss I could argue is, I like the fact that I still enjoy it. It's still entertaining. Then you move into the E-Space trilogy, which is another kind of story arc, I suppose. The Doctor and Romana and K9 get trapped in a different universe, E-Space, because apparently we live in N-Space, something that was brought up in the 80s and has never been mentioned since, really. But these 3 stories, Full Circle, State of Decay and Warrior's Gate, whilst not perfect, I think Full Circle is probably the strongest of the 3, although I do enjoy State of Decay. However, I would say that that story does not work in this season. I think if you lift that out and place it in, I don't know, say season 14, makes a hell of a lot more sense. But it's still good for what it is. And then you've got a story like Warrior's Gate, which is really fucking confusing. But again, it's interesting and there's a lot of cool stuff there and you can appreciate what they're trying to do. It's very Doctor Who meets art house. And if you can get on board with that, then you can get on board with this story. Keeper of Traken is a forgettable story, but again, it's good when you're watching it. And it also reintroduces us to the Master for the first time in, I think, about 5 years. Then Lagavulin, probably the best story of the season, in my opinion. I have a lot of nostalgia with Lagavulin, so maybe that's why I like it as much as I do. But it's Tom's last one. Maybe it's not right to be Tom's last one. I think if this was, for example, Davison's last story, I know Caves is amazing, but hear me out on this one. If this story was done for Davison's last story, it makes more sense. This isn't really a Tom Baker style story. However, it's great. It's got a lot of cool ideas in there, a lot of dumb ones as well, but I like the idea of the Watcher. I like seeing the Master come back. I like seeing the universe fall apart. Legopolis as a concept and a place is quite clever, and Tom's regeneration I think is done really well. I think because this season had so much change and so much different, and you do have Tom not on fine form for the majority of the season, not all the time, because there are some genuinely great Fourth Doctor moments throughout this season. People tend to shit on this season and act like, yeah, it's not that great. And look, like I said before, I'm not saying that this is definitively the most underrated season. It's just I tend to see more negative stuff towards season 18, whereas I personally don't agree with a lot of it. I can understand where people are coming from, I just don't see it. This season definitely feels a hell of a lot like a breath of fresh air, and I think the last couple of years prior to this did start to become a bit stale, did start to become a bit samey and repetitive. It did get too silly at times. It did get out of control with Tom Baker sometimes. So I like seeing a new spin, and I like seeing Doctor Who in the 1980s and this clear direction that John Nathan Turner had. You don't necessarily have to like it or agree with it, but at least appreciate that he was trying something new and trying something different, especially with the new box set that came out a few months ago. If you haven't already, check that out, because a lot of the behind the scenes stuff as well, and watching these stories again, it just reminds me that, yeah, this is actually quite a decent season. I don't know why I don't revisit it more. It feels like Doctor Who for a more mature audience, or at least it feels like if you were a kid when you started watching Tom Baker's run, that you would be the right age to kind of appreciate it when it came out. So now that I think that I'm a bit older, I can appreciate this season a hell of a lot more than I did when I was younger. Before, I just thought it was boring, whereas now that my attitudes and my tastes have changed somewhat, I look at this and I think, yeah, it's pretty good. Can I just say that Tom's new outfit is fucking beautiful as well. I know it looks more costumey than his, you know, normal get-up that he has, but I love it. It's so beautiful, it's so regal, and I love that scarf. I think you get a more somber tone, and especially later on, especially in a story like Legopolis, it has a real funeral feel to it. And I like that. I like the fact that this season feels like it's building to the Doctor's regeneration, but it's not in a prophecy sort of way. It's just kind of, shit, something doesn't feel right here. The mood in Legopolis is just set right from the beginning, and I love that. I love the music, the atmosphere, everything about this season, apart from the Leisure Hive. But let me know in the comments, guys, what you think. Would you say that season 18 is the most underrated? If not, which season is? There are no right or wrong answers, so let's not argue with each other, you know. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like on it, subscribe for more. Social media and Patreon links are in the description below as usual, so if you would follow me on any of those things, then I would absolutely love you forever. But until next time, guys, you take care of yourselves. Goodbye. Although thinking about it, I do think that there are quite a few underrated seasons of Doctor Who. Should I have said it on my channel that 18 is the most underrated? Fuck it, I have now.